I smelled chloroform before I saw Ryan. He jumped out from behind a white van with a soaked rag in his hand and rushed at Alice, who had just opened her car door. It was Sunday, 11 at night, and we were standing at the far edge of the hospital parking lot under old oaks where the light barely reached. I hit him with my bag, which had a heavy soup thermos, and he stumbled but didn't fall. Ryan turned on me and hissed something about an old lonely bitch, and I started screaming. The guards ran from the service entrance, and one of them, Marcus, caught Ryan at the barrier. In his jacket pocket they found not only chloroform, but plastic zip ties and duct tape. But to explain how we got to that moment, I need to go back 2 months. I met Alice Ching in 2016 when she started a rotation in our surgical unit at St. Joseph's. She was 24, wanted to be an anesthesiologist, and we got close on nights. Alice was quick, calm, and stubborn in a way I respected. She'd take rough cases without flinching and then go right back in. I'm older, divorced, and protective by habit. Night shift friendships form fast because you see each other at your worst. Bloody scrubs, bad coffee, and gallows jokes no one else understands. He made that joke by the vending machines, smug, like he expected me to laugh. The first red flag with Ryan was small, a joke he made about male patients getting a free show. Alice told him to grow up. He didn't like that. Trust me. In July that year, Alice brought her boyfriend to the cafeteria. Ryan Coleman was a third-year med student, red hair, average height, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. We talked maybe 15 minutes because he had pharmacology, but I watched him tense when Alice mentioned a patient named Derek. After he left, I asked if he was okay. Alice said he was stressed. A month later, she broke down crying in the break room and told me everything. Ryan started fights whenever she catheterized male patients or scrubbed for urology. He called it cheating and demanded she beg colleagues to take those cases. She tried to explain that nurses don't choose by gender. He raised his voice. Meanwhile, he was messaging on 3 dating sites. When Alice saw the notifications, he said it was practice for communicating with patients. I told her it wasn't normal and it wasn't safe. She said she still wanted the future they'd planned, and I understood. But the plan was already burning. We talked next steps. I told her to document dates and times and what he said. Later that week, he followed her to the bus stop and demanded her phone to audit boundaries. She refused. He texted that she was corrupting herself at work. It sounded like he was trying to pick a fight he could win on paper. By early September, she ended it after Ryan came into the hospital and demanded our charge nurse review Alice's schedule. He wanted her taken off certain cases. Our charge told him to leave the unit and not come back. I helped Alice pack her things from his apartment while he was in class, and she moved in with her aunt in Lincoln Park. For a few days, she slept, ate real food, and tried to feel normal. A week later, the real stalking started. Ryan used his student login to get into the hospital system and track all of Alice's shifts. He appeared in the courtyard when she stepped out for a cigarette, stood by the entrance to the women's locker room. Once he tried to enter an operating room as a student observer, even though his rotation was in another building. Administration helped Alice get a temporary restraining order, and that only made him angrier. He began sending her photos of male patients from our unit with captions like, "Is this your lover?" Security was alerted. But in a huge medical complex with 800 beds, keeping track of one stalker was almost impossible. On September 30th, when Alice was finishing her evening shift, I stayed on purpose to walk her to the car. Her white Honda Civic was at the far end of staff parking in a dim patch. We walked together, talking about her certification exam, and I heard footsteps behind us. I turned and saw no one, but my gut said something was off. I offered to drive her in my car since I'd parked closer to the entrance. She shook her head and said she couldn't live scared forever. We reached her Honda, she unlocked it, and I started to angle back toward my lane. That's when Ryan burst from behind a white van with a soaked rag. The smell hit fast and familiar. We keep chloroform in the lab for certain procedures, and out here it was wrong. He aimed the rag at Alice's face and I swung my bag. The soup thermos inside connected with his shoulder. He stumbled but didn't drop the rag. He spun toward me and I saw something in his eyes I didn't like. Not rage, a decision. He said, low, "Move, old lady." Then at Alice, "You're coming with me." Alice froze for a second like she was computing the move that would get her through. I stepped in front of her. He feinted left and tried to slip past me. I hit him again, catching his forearm. The rag fell. He went for it and I kicked it under the car. "Security!" I shouted toward the building as loud as I could. Ryan swore, dug into his jacket, and yanked out a roll of duct tape and a handful of plastic zip ties. Any doubt about intent died there. Alice grabbed my sleeve and said, "Please don't let him touch me." I told her to get behind me and call the operator. Say chloroform, staff lot, possible abduction. Headlights turned down our lane. Ryan flinched hard and bolted for the exit. Marcus and Tom cut him off by the barrier and took him down. Ryan tried to slip between the pay kiosk and the wall. Tom body checked him and Marcus locked his wrists. He thrashed once and then went slack. Alice gripped my arm. "I'm okay," she said, then corrected herself. "I think I'm okay." She called the operator and reported chloroform, a rag, zip ties, and tape. I kept her back from the car and the rag until units arrived. The police pulled in about 5 minutes later. They cuffed Ryan, read his rights, and bagged the rag in a vial. A sergeant asked us to walk through what happened. I said he aimed the rag at Alice, and I hit him. Alice added that he had been stalking her, and there was a temporary order. Detectives followed up the next day. They said Ryan had rented a motel room 15 minutes from the hospital. In that room, there was a crib. They said he told them he planned to keep Alice there until she agreed to come back. He took a plea. 2 years for attempted kidnapping, unlawful possession of a controlled substance, and violating the restraining order. The medical school expelled him. Alice stayed with us, switched to days, and parked at the main entrance under cameras. I think about that night more than I admit. If I'd gone home on time, if she'd parked closer, if security had been slower, we might be telling a different story. She thanks me. I tell her it wasn't heroics. It was a thermos, a kicked rag, and 2 guards doing their job. When I saw the box on the steps of my dorm with the words, "For my only one," I knew right away that Phil had found a way into the building. This started at the beginning of spring semester of my sophomore year. I'd enrolled in an advanced psych seminar and met Phil Grayson there. He was a senior and the TA. Tall, dark hair, the kind of easy smile that made me feel singled out. He offered to help with my term project, and we started meeting in the library at night. 2 weeks in, something shifted. Long looks that lasted too long, the kind of shoulder touches that feel like a secret. A month later, we were official, but he wanted it quiet because of his TA position. I told myself it was kind of romantic, like a movie secret. Later, I realized it was about control. It was little things at first. He asked for a copy of my schedule so he could plan study blocks. He'd walk me to class and then hang at the end of the hall like a sentry. If I said I was busy, he'd ask with what, exactly. I explained the dorm had sign-in rules, that outside visitors needed an escort. He joked that rules were for freshmen and kissed my forehead, like that ended it. It didn't. The night I found that box on our steps, no escort, no sign-in, there was a card inside, a quote about fate, and how some people are made for each other. Nobody on my floor had signed him in. That bothered me more than the quote. I told myself to breathe and took the box upstairs, but I started keeping the deadbolt latched, even when my roommate was home. By week 5, it felt like every conversation was a quiz. Where are you now? Who's that guy in your lab group? Why didn't you answer for 9 minutes? He framed it like care. I just worry about you. One Friday, I went to the cafe with friends. My phone buzzed non-stop. 23 texts in an hour. He counted them later, like it proved something. You disappeared, he wrote. I hadn't. I was across campus drinking an oversweet latte, talking about midterms and whether the gym showers were actually clean. 6 weeks in, I ended it. I picked the university cafe at noon. Bright, busy, safe. I told him I couldn't do the constant check-ins, the questions, the way he showed up without asking. He sat there with his hands around a cup he never sipped. He nodded and said he understood. I get it. I pushed too hard. His smile didn't reach his eyes. They were flat, like nothing was on. He stood, said, "Okay," and walked out. For 2 weeks, nothing. No texts, no library accidents. I slept better. I thought maybe he'd actually taken it like an adult. Then people around me got strange. Casey pulled me aside after class and asked if I was really thinking of leaving school. I laughed because it was so off base. Who told you that? She shrugged and said she'd heard it in the rec center from someone who knows you. A day later, Marcus asked if I needed a ride to meetings. I stared at him. What meetings? He hesitated. AA? I heard you were having a rough time. That one hit hard. I don't even like beer. I started tracing where the rumors began. Casey said a guy from Psych had mentioned seeing me upset lately. Marcus said the story came up while he was in the student center. 2 other friends said they'd bumped into Phil. Yep, Phil, in the gym, in the lounge, at the smoothie cart. He seemed worried about you, one of them said, and I felt my face go hot. Worried wasn't the word. It was positioning. He popped up everywhere after that. Saturday mornings, I'd duck into this tiny coffee place off the bus line, the one nobody bothers with because the hours are weird. He was there at the back table, pretending to be shocked. "Oh, hey. What are the odds?" he'd say, like we were sitcom extras. Wednesday afternoons, I worked part-time at the campus bookstore. He wandered in twice in a single shift, acting like he'd forgotten a pen. The second time, he set it on the counter and asked the manager some dumb question about returns, but he kept looking at me like he was checking a box. I stopped going places alone for a while. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, because it was the simplest way to cut down the accidents. If I was with someone, he didn't start conversations. He waited at a distance and watched. I told my RA about the box on our steps and asked if anyone had reported tailgating at the front door. She said people piggyback all the time and rolled her eyes, like I was tattling about dishes in the sink. I took the hint and asked our night desk worker instead. He said he'd seen a guy flash a textbook and slip past with a group after 10 p.m. a few nights back. He couldn't swear it was Phil. He also couldn't swear it wasn't. When I confronted Phil, outside, in daylight, with a friend at the other end of the sidewalk, I kept it simple. Stop talking to my friends about me. Stop showing up at my job. He blinked slow, like the words had to travel through water to reach him. I'm just trying to make sure you're okay, he said. People ask how you're doing. I answer. I told him that if he cared, he'd leave me alone. He smiled like that was cute. Running into people isn't a crime, he said, and he glanced past me at the bookstore door. That weekend, I went to the little coffee place again, thinking maybe he'd stop if I stopped changing my routine for him. He got there first. He lifted his eyebrows like we'd just discovered a coincidence. Oh, hey. What are the odds? I blocked his number and removed him from everything. Friends still relayed that he asked about me. My roommate Liza said she saw him by our dorm late one night, hands in his pockets, standing under the busted light like he belonged there. When I looked out our window a minute later, he was gone. I went to the university office that handles complaints and explained the whole pattern. Rumors, coincidences, the box on our steps. They kept their voices calm and used careful words. Technically, he wasn't violating policy. He was in public places. He was talking. If he approached me again, they said, I should document it and call campus security. I left with a pamphlet and a case number, but nothing that felt like a lock on a door. I started changing routes, different paths to class, different coffee shops. I let people know when I was coming and going, not for drama, just so someone would notice if I didn't show up. The constant alertness wore me down. I stopped listening to music when I walked. I kept my keys in my hand. I moved my bed so I could see the door. One evening I came back from a late study session, and the door was latched, the window was latched. Everything looked normal. But my favorite book was on my bed, open. I had left it on the shelf, closed. A single line was underlined in pen, something about second chances. I stared at it for a long time because I wanted there to be another explanation. Like Liza had borrowed it without asking. She swore she hadn't touched it. We checked the windows and the closet again. Nothing looked disturbed. I took a photo and put the book in my backpack. I started sleeping with the desk chair propped under the knob. 3 weeks later, I was heading back from a night class. The elevator was out, so I took the stairs to the 4th floor. The stairwell was quiet in that way that makes sound travel weird. Somewhere above me or to the side, I couldn't place it. I heard a metallic scrape. It came from the direction of the fire exit. That door is supposed to be sealed from the inside, only swinging out if there's a fire alarm. I stopped on the landing and listened. Nothing. I told myself old buildings make noises and kept going. I didn't run, but I didn't waste time. At my door, I saw the box. The same wrapping. Red. Too neat. My chest went tight. I didn't touch it at first. I scanned the hall. No one. I unlocked, slid my backpack inside, then pulled the box in and locked up again before opening it. Inside were my things, the hair clip I'd left in his car, the little spiral notebook I'd used for observations, a USB drive I'd once lent him, even a coffee receipt I threw out months ago. At the bottom was a photo of us through the library window. I had never seen that picture before. On the back, in the same neat handwriting, I'm always near, even when you don't see. I called campus security. My hands shook enough that I had to set the phone on speaker and put it on the desk. I told them I had a stalking complaint already filed, that a box was at my door, that our fire door might have been forced. The officer on duty asked if I was safe. I said yes. My door was locked. He told me to stay inside. 2 officers came up within minutes. They checked the hall, the fire exit, the stairwell. One of them crouched by the exit and pointed out fresh marks on the latch plate, small but obvious. They took the box and the photo as evidence. I gave a statement. Liza came back while they were finishing, and seeing her face when she read that message made something inside me go cold and very steady. Security pulled footage from the cameras. The RA emailed me the clip the next morning and asked if it was him. The video showed a figure prying the fire door with a tool, then slipping inside with a box. The timestamp matched the window when I was in class. It was Phil. That was the proof the administration needed. They moved him to remote classes immediately and started a conduct process. I went to court with a victim advocate and got a restraining order. I keep thinking about how normal it all seemed at first. Class, study sessions, texting. and how fast it twisted. People talk about red flags like they're bright and obvious, but they're small, like a schedule check that turns into a location demand, like a coincidence that becomes a pattern. I still take the stairs sometimes because I don't like closed spaces, and I still pause at the fire door and listen. That's where it ends for me. Listening, then walking past. The police put handcuffs on me right on the doorstep while the paramedics were taking away a guy with a skull fracture, and the detective said I was under arrest for attempted murder. My sister Jade was yelling that it was self-defense, that he broke in and attacked her first, but they didn't listen. I kept saying I was 19 and our parents were out of town. The cuffs dug in. This started 3 weeks earlier when Jade asked for a small after-graduation party. 18. New boyfriend named Kyle, 2 weeks in. I said 10 people, pizza, games. Our parents left me in charge. Kyle promised 2 or 3 friends. I had no idea he'd post our address in their class Facebook group. Someone screenshotted it and spread it. By 9, cars kept pulling up. First a few, then crowds, until there were strangers in our living room, kitchen, even the garage. I tried to clear them, said it was private. They laughed and pushed past. Someone brought alcohol. Music went loud. Neighbors texted. Jade got scared and went upstairs, locked her door. I told her to stay put. It didn't matter. Around 10, I spotted Tyler, her ex, 20, kicked out last year for attacking a teacher. Jade dumped him 8 months ago after he shoved her. He'd lurked outside our place a few times until Dad threatened to call the cops. We thought he'd stopped. Tyler shouldered through toward the stairs. I grabbed his arm and told him to leave. He shook me off and ran up. Seconds later, Jade screamed and wood cracked. He was breaking her door. Phones came out. I yelled to call 911. Nobody did. I reached the top. The door was smashed. Tyler had Jade by the wrist in the hall. She clawed his face, telling him to get out. I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him off her, shouting to get out of our house. He spun, swung at my head. I flinched. His fist grazed me. I shoved him to make space between him and Jade. We were at the top of the stairs. He lost balance, reached for the railing, missed, and went backward. For a second it looked like a stumble, then he tumbled. Halfway down his skull hit the newel post. The crack made people gasp. He landed twisted, blood leaking from his ear. The downstairs went dead quiet. Someone whispered he was dead. Jade stood shaking, saying, "Oh my God." I told her to lock herself back in her room. She didn't move. I went down fast, hands open. I crouched near him, didn't touch. His chest moved, shallow. "Call an ambulance," I said. A girl asked if he was breathing. "Yes." I pointed at a guy filming and said to call 911. He blinked. Kyle finally stepped forward, white as paper. "I'm calling," he said, babbling he never invited Tyler. I told him to give dispatch our address. I said Tyler's name and age. Someone said I shoved him on purpose. Someone else said he swung first. 2 guys argued. I told them to back up. Sirens sounded far away. "Turn the music off," I said. A kid yanked the speaker plug. The house felt wrong and still. I watched Tyler's breathing. I didn't check his pulse. I knew the second I touched him, somebody would say I was doing something to him. Jade sat halfway down the stairs, crying. "Is he going to die?" she asked. I said I didn't know. Kids drifted toward the door. "Don't leave," I said. "Cops will want statements." Some slipped out anyway. I kept repeating the address for Kyle in case he froze. He put the call on speaker. The dispatcher asked about bleeding, consciousness, safety. "We're safe," I said. "He fell after attacking my sister." Even as I said it, I knew how it would sound later. Everyone looked at me, just waiting. Someone handed me a towel. I set it near him and didn't touch him. The dispatcher asked for someone to wait outside for the ambulance. I pointed at a quiet kid by the door. "Go wave them in." He nodded and went. One guy finally called an ambulance. The next 20 minutes turned into a mess. Most kids bolted, not even looking at each other, just grabbing backpacks and jumping fences, but a few stayed, frozen or babbling. Jade sat on the top step with her knees pulled up, shaking so hard her phone kept slipping from her hand. I tried to find a pulse on Tyler's neck and then his wrist, but I wasn't sure I felt anything, and I remembered a coach saying not to move someone with a head injury, so I took my hands back. The house smelled like spilled beer and sweat, and it made me want to open a window, but I didn't touch anything. When the paramedics came in, they didn't waste time. One asked what happened, the other started checking his airway and pupils and taped gauze behind his ear. They slid a board under him, collar on, straps. The police came right on their heels, and the first thing one officer said was, "Who pushed him down the stairs?" "I did," I said, because lying would only make it worse. I told him Tyler broke in, kicked the door, grabbed my sister. Jade stood up and yelled down that he dragged her by the wrist, that she thought he'd hurt her again. The cop kept his eyes on me. He said I used excessive force, that I could have called 911 and waited. I said I did try. He said I could have closed the door and made space. I said there was no door. He wrote and didn't react. When the paramedics took Tyler out, one of them said it looked like a serious skull injury. That word, serious, landed like a weight. Then the cuffs came out. They read me my rights. Jade tried to follow, but another officer kept her back. I got guided, no, shoved, out to the patrol car. The detective leaned in and said Tyler was in critical condition, and if he died, the charge might change. I remember thinking that I should ask for a lawyer, then realizing I didn't even know how to get one from the back seat of a cruiser. The station was loud and fluorescent. They booked me. They took my shoelaces. I called my parents and only got Dad's voicemail the first try. He called back an hour later, quiet and focused, said they were driving back, said not to talk to anyone but a lawyer. I didn't sleep that night. Every time my eyes closed, I saw Tyler's heel slip off the edge of the top step. I spent 3 days in a cell before the lawyer my parents hired got me out on bond. Those days were long and flat. The guy in the bunk across from me snored and told me not to stare or I'd make a thing of it. The guard said court was backlogged. Tyler was at the hospital with a fractured skull and a bad concussion. A nurse told the detective he was lucky. I was charged with attempted first-degree murder. 20 years was the number someone said. I kept repeating self-defense, like maybe if I said it enough it would change paper into facts. It didn't. What actually saved me was something boring. The doorbell camera my parents installed a month earlier after packages went missing. The footage showed Tyler bulldozing through the crowd at our door, ignoring people trying to hold him back. You could see his face, eyes hard, jaw set. Then the audio picked up Jade screaming in the crack of her door. The investigator on the case got a warrant for Kyle's phone, and that's where they found the messages from 2 days before. Tyler. Send the address. I need to deal with Jade. Kyle. Dude, not sure that's a good idea. And then he sent the address and the start time anyway. It turned out he knew Tyler would show and pushed the party info into the class group on purpose, so there'd be a cover. That part made me angrier than the handcuffs, honestly, because if he'd just kept it small like we planned, none of this would have happened. A week after I was arrested, the prosecutor dropped the charges. He said the video matched what I said and what Jade said, defense of another. Tyler got hit with home invasion, assault, and a restraining order violation I didn't even know existed. Jade had filed a few months back with Mom. Kyle got probation for helping and for not telling anyone what he knew. Jade blocked him and deleted him everywhere. Dad fixed the door and the railing with a contractor, and the bill sat on the counter like a reminder. People at school, the ones who still texted me, said I did the right thing. That didn't change the sound I still hear in my head. That moment halfway down the stairs, and those 3 nights staring at the ceiling under a buzzing light, counting seconds and wondering if I'd thrown my life away for protecting my sister. The place that was supposed to be a home turned into a prison a month after I moved in. I was 22 when I met Connor at the city farmers market in March 2018. He sold goat cheese and eggs, joked about the good kind of hard work, and asked questions in a way that made me feel seen. I'd just been laid off and got a text that my month-to-month room was being taken back by the landlord's nephew. His offer to stay on the farm sounded like a lifeline. I grew up in foster homes, never had a real base, and Connor knew exactly how to talk about family, like it was a door I could finally walk through. 2 weeks later, we loaded my stuff into his pickup and drove 40 miles out to his family's place, 12 acres between cornfields. First days felt solid. He taught me to milk goats, how to collect eggs without cracking them, how to fix a sagging fence. He was patient. Then dinner the first night turned into a crowd. His cousins, Trey and Blake, their wives Crystal and Ashley, plus a couple of rotating relatives who seemed to appear whenever food did. Trey grinned and said, "Another city girl. Bet she lasts a month." Everyone laughed. I smiled, but I felt it in my stomach. 2 weeks later, I didn't latch a pen right. 3 goats bolted into the trees. We chased them for hours. Back at the feed shed, Connor shoved me hard enough that my shoulder hit the wall. He snapped, then caught himself, apologized, blamed stress. I tried to bring it up with Crystal after. She'd watched from the kitchen window, and she cut me off. "We work until we drop out here. Don't start drama." By summer 2018, I was free labor for everyone. Up at 5 to milk 18 goats, feed around 40 hens, gather eggs, cook breakfast for 7, clean, then weed tomatoes and squash until my wrists ached. Connor worked the sawmill 3 days a week. Trey and Blake handled the markets. I got left with Crystal and Ashley most days. They turned nitpicking into a sport. You slice crooked. You hang laundry like you're trying to hide it. Use your inside voice. Then, speak up. We're not mind readers. Ashley dumped a bucket of dirty water over my head after I finished the chicken coop and laughed, said I smelled like I'd improved. When I told Connor, he said I didn't get country humor. The shoves became grabs, then slaps, then punches that only ever landed out of sight, usually in the shed with the door closed and the radio on. No one heard anything over the animals. By fall, I was more tool than person. My hands were blistered and split, bruises bloomed, and I dropped 20 pounds without trying. I stopped looking at myself because I didn't recognize who I saw. In October 2019, they sold my car. Connor said it needed a major repair anyway, and the cash was for the household. I got $300 out of $1,800, which Crystal took for my share of food and utilities. I didn't argue because there wasn't anything to argue with. No car meant no way out. The nearest town was 8 miles. No bus. Cell service came and went, mostly went. My old smartphone died in spring 2020, and they handed me a brick of a flip phone. Just for emergencies. I knew they checked the call log because once I dialed a number wrong and Blake walked in 2 minutes later, smiling without his eyes, and asked who I thought I was calling. Connor kept telling me he loved me. He said the city rots people, said we were building something honest. That pain was just part of real life. Some nights he held me and was kind until I fell asleep. Some mornings he woke me by kicking my foot and telling me to move faster. I told myself the good version was the real one. Then I started counting the days I didn't cry and running out of fingers. By 2021, I knew I would die there if I didn't leave. I didn't make plans out loud. I didn't make them on paper. I counted steps in my head, gate, fence, gravel, road, and then stopped because counting didn't build a ride or a map. Then in January 2022, a letter arrived from Mrs. Holloway, my high school English teacher. 10-year reunion stuff. It had been forwarded from an old foster address. I stared at my name written neat like a person I used to be. Connor read over my shoulder, said, "Trash." I said it was harmless. A teacher. A reunion. He watched my face too long and then tossed it on the table and said not to get ideas. I nodded and kept my voice level and my hands still. I waited until he was done eating and took the dishes to the sink and didn't look back at the letter. After everyone went to bed, I read it twice, then 3 times, and memorized the curve of every sentence because I didn't have a way to take it with me anywhere. At the bottom, in blue ink, she had written her phone number. I called her from the flip phone when everyone drove to the market on Saturday morning. I tried to sound normal, to ask about the reunion like I was just checking a time, but she heard something in my voice right away. She asked, "Do you need help?" I didn't plan to cry. It just happened. The words came out in pieces and then in a rush, 5 years in 5 minutes. She didn't interrupt. She said my name once, steady, and then she laid out the plan like we were talking about homework. She would pick me up for the reunion on Sunday the 13th of March. If Connor tried to block it, he'd look like a controlling jerk to a teacher, and he cared too much about looking like a good country guy to risk that. I said yes, because it was the first plan that didn't require miracles. That afternoon I moved like I always did, just a little slower so I wouldn't drop anything. When the house was empty, I slid my documents, a few photos, and my one favorite book into a grocery bag and taped it under the bathroom sink. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped my passport in the drain. I kept telling myself I'd only go back for the bag if the timing worked. No hero moves, no big shows. I wiped the counter, checked the mirror, and went back outside to stack feed like it was any other Saturday. Sunday morning she pulled up in her Honda, smiling with the same calm face she used back when kids forgot their essays. Connor came out onto the porch with his coffee and played friendly. She said how nice it was out here, how proud everyone must be. Nothing sharp, nothing that could be twisted. He relaxed. That was the window. I picked up a small backpack I'd already packed with a change of clothes and the bag from under the sink tucked inside. I said I'd be back that evening after the reunion. He didn't like it. I saw it. But he couldn't say no without showing his real face. I got in the car. We rolled down the driveway, turned onto the road, and I didn't look back. We drove 20 miles without saying much. Then she asked carefully, "You're not going back there, right?" I shook my head. She nodded once and took the next turn, straight to the police station. I gave a statement. I told them about the shed, the flip phone, the sold car, the cousins who laughed. They wrote it all down and asked clear questions. While we were still there, Connor started calling her phone and leaving messages that got mean fast. The officer heard one, looked at me, and said we'd file a restraining order. They did, and they found me a spot in a shelter the same day. I slept in a room with 5 other women. I heard nightmares in other people's voices, and still felt safer than I had in 5 years on that farm. I stayed 3 months. By June 2022, I had a job in a library and a small apartment on the edge of town, and I learned to get through a day without looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. In June 2023, I met Robert at the animal shelter where he volunteers. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't act like I owe him anything. We dated slow, coffee in public places, walks where I could leave any time, small plans I could cancel without a fight. For the first time, I understood what it means to be with someone and not be scared. I can say no, and he hears it. And then we talk about what to do instead. In December, Mrs. Holloway had a stroke and died. I didn't get to say thank you enough. That loss sits heavy. I'm 27 now. I'm an assistant librarian. I live with Robert and his cat, Oliver. Sometimes I still wake up at 4 thinking I need to milk goats. Then I remember I'm free. No one is coming to kick my foot off the bed. No one owns my time. I still scroll past farm photos with a tight stomach. I still flinch when voices jump. But I'm here, and I'm breathing. And every day without violence is a win they don't get to take. I found the 5th note under my windshield wiper at 7 a.m., 2 weeks after I broke up with Marcus. This one had a hand-drawn floor plan of a farm in Montana, with labels like kennels, our bedroom, and isolation from toxic people. The first 4 had been weird in a preachy way, stuff about sacred bonds with injured souls, and me losing compassion since I wouldn't help him rescue strays. Marcus had been a volunteer at the shelter where our clinic sent spay and neuter cases. We dated for 5 months. At first, I thought his intensity meant he cared. Then it was 2 a.m. door knocks and a cough-rattling pit mix in his back seat, while he accused me of being heartless because I wouldn't turn my 1-bedroom into an ICU. I work as a vet tech in a small animal clinic, not an emergency hospital, and definitely not in my apartment. After I ended it, Dr. Pam called me in. 7 anonymous callers in 2 days said I'd been rough during procedures. The animals they described didn't match anything I'd handled. Same week, our Google page tanked under a wave of 1 stars about a cold-hearted tech who laughed while animals suffered. It read like Marcus, his phrasing, the way he weaponized compassion. Knowing isn't proving, though. I took photos of every note, saved envelopes, told myself to document and keep my head down. It was still quiet in the parking lot when I stood there with that farm drawing, the red pen labeling our bedroom. I locked my car twice. Inside, I busied myself with the morning meds and told myself to be boring, predictable, safe. The receptionist asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. By noon, 3 clients asked if I was the tech in the Facebook posts. I said we didn't have a Facebook page like that and went back to nail trims with my hands shaking. The online crap got louder when I started seeing Dave, an admin from the clinic across town. 2 weeks in, my parents in Oregon got an unmarked envelope. Photos of me and Dave at a coffee shop, plus a typed note saying I was cheating on my fiancé. I've never been engaged. My mom called, voice tight, asking what this was. I told her about Marcus. She went quiet in that way moms do when they're past mad and straight into protective. That same night, a Facebook page popped up. Truth about Paws and Claws Clinic. Animals in danger. It hit 1,000 followers in 5 days. He posted graphic animal injuries from random corners of the internet, claiming they happened at our clinic. My name was in the comments over and over. We had a lawyer send a cease and desist. Reporting it through Facebook felt like yelling into wind. I started seeing his silver Honda Accord too much. Near the grocery store. Same pump line at a gas station by my place. Parked 3 houses down at 2 a.m. Dave helped put a camera at my door. 2 nights later, there he was, hoodie up, leaving an envelope and photographing my plates. The footage had his posture. His shoes I bought him months back. I felt sick when I recognized them. Inside the envelope, more sanctuary rants, 3 farm drawings, printed real estate listings circled with, "No one will find us here." I took everything to the police, the footage, the notes, screenshots, the page. The officer was polite but blunt. No threats of harm. No trespass inside. We can take a report. He suggested a restraining order through civil court and warned that some judges don't see animal rescue notes as threatening. I argued that the isolation comments were not normal. He shrugged in that "I get it, but" way. I left with a case number. At work, people asked if the abuse rumors were true. Dr. Pam sent a clinic-wide email telling staff to direct questions to her, and then blasted a formal statement to our clients. I kept my head down, did my jobs, went home. I threw up most mornings, then brushed my teeth and went in anyway. We had cancellations from longtime clients who wanted to wait till things were clarified. Things were clarified. It didn't matter. 2 weeks later, Dr. Pam's lawyer got the Facebook page nuked for defamation and stolen images. It took affidavits, DMCA paperwork, and stupidly clear evidence. The picture metadata even showed totally different states, but it went down. I filed for a temporary restraining order. I printed every message, note, photo, 40 pages, tabbed by date. The judge granted a temporary order for 30 days. The officer served him. Dave said, "Breathe." That's something for 3 days. Nothing. No accord, no envelopes. The clinic phone quieted. I started to believe maybe the line in the sand mattered to him enough to back off. Then on May 12th, I arrived at work at 7 a.m. for opening duties. 2 hours into my shift, Daryl, the security guard from the office building next door, ran into our clinic saying a man was standing by our service entrance with a large metal crate and acting weird. He was out of breath and kept glancing at the back hallway. Dr. Pam picked up the phone to call the police while I moved to the procedure room and looked through the small window toward the loading area. Marcus stood by the curb with a transport crate big enough for a Great Dane or a small person. He held a syringe between his fingers like a pen. When he saw me at the window, he smiled, then took out his phone and called the clinic's main line. I answered because the ringing was loud and automatic, and I didn't want anyone in the lobby to hear this. His voice came out calm, almost gentle. He said I was sick like an injured animal, that I needed to be sedated and taken somewhere I could be properly cared for, away from people who'd made me cold. I told him there was a restraining order and the police were coming. He said, "They don't understand. You're forgetting who you are. I can help you remember. You'll thank me when it's quiet." He held up the syringe toward the window like he wanted me to see it. I could hear sirens getting closer. He walked to the service door and tried the handle. Daryl had already locked it from inside and was standing behind me with a heavy flashlight, not saying much, just ready. Marcus pulled on the door twice, then braced a shoulder like he'd try to force it. Daryl said, "Move back." I stepped away from the window. Through the glass, I saw the police cars turn into the lot. Marcus looked over his shoulder, hesitated, then reached for the door again. Officers were on him in seconds. They shouted commands. He jerked. The syringe dropped and rolled under the crate, and then he was face down on the pavement with 2 officers pinning his arms. Dr. Pam told me to stay inside until they waved us out. I watched them cuff him and bag the syringe. The syringe contained acepromazine, a sedative we use for large dogs. The dosage would have caused respiratory failure in someone my weight. Security cameras captured everything. Him waiting with the crate, him calling me, him pulling the door. The report included my temporary restraining order, the notes, the car sightings, the Facebook page screenshots. He was charged with attempted kidnapping, illegal possession of controlled veterinary drugs, stalking, and violating the restraining order I'd obtained a week earlier. The detective said the crate and the syringe made the intent clear. I gave my statement twice, once at the scene and once at the station. I don't remember what I ate that day. I do remember Dave waiting outside the station with a bottle of water and just putting a hand on my shoulder while I sat in his car breathing like I'd run a race. The psychiatric evaluation later said he had delusional disorder with erotomanic features. In simple terms, he believed I was sick with denial of my true calling, and that only he could heal me by isolating me. In court, he stared at the floor. He got 3 years probation with mandatory treatment and a permanent order barring him from contacting me or coming near my workplace. I wanted prison. The DA explained the plea deal, the evaluation, the lack of prior violent felony. I said I understood. I didn't, not really, but I understood the rules. Dr. Pam's lawyer got the Facebook page fully removed, and we slowly rebuilt our reputation. We posted transparent updates about protocols. We answered questions. We refunded 2 clients who felt shaken. I deleted most of my social media. I changed my routines, but not in ways that wrecked my life. I kept working. There were still moments, like when a silver car slowed outside the clinic, that locked up my shoulders. Mostly, I kept moving. 5 years later, an Instagram friend request popped up from _chances_sanctuary. One photo, a golden retriever on a porch, captioned with a bland rescue quote. In the corner, a man's hand with a thin, diagonal scar at the wrist I recognized instantly. I blocked the account immediately and still don't use my real name on any social media platform. My dad told me this story only when I turned 18, but I remember that day in the garage like it was yesterday. I was 7 years old in May 2015, sitting on an upside-down bucket in our garage, handing my dad wrenches while he changed the oil in his Ford pickup. It was a hot Saturday afternoon, around 3 p.m., and the garage door was wide open to let in some air. My mom had driven to the next town over for groceries, and it was just me and Dad working on the truck. I was proud that I could tell the difference between socket wrenches and open-end wrenches, and Dad was teaching me about car maintenance. I saw her first, a tall woman with short dark hair standing in the doorway, backlit by the sun. She had something black in her right hand, and I thought it was maybe a neighbor coming to borrow a tool. I said, "Dad, there's a lady here." And my dad rolled out from under the truck on his mechanic's creeper. When he saw her, his face went white as paper, and he slowly stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. He didn't say her name. He shifted so I was behind him and said, "Can I help you?" The woman didn't answer at first. She looked at me, then at him, then raised the black thing just enough for me to know it was a gun. My feet stopped swinging. Dad's voice went flat. "Ma'am, please don't point that at my kid." She blinked like she expected him to say something else, then smiled a little. "Hi, Danny. 9 years is a long time, isn't it?" Her voice was calm, almost friendly, but the gun stayed up. Dad tried to stand wider between us, but she stepped in and told him not to move. Then she talked like she had practiced it. She'd been searching for him for years, checking driver's license databases and watching his family on social media. My mom sometimes posted photos, and that was how Lindy found our address 3 months ago through the DMV. She wanted Dad to give back her money, $120,000 she said he stole when he ran. Dad kept saying it wasn't her money, that it was his own earnings, but she cut him off and said he ruined her life and had to pay. She said if he didn't write a check right now, she'd burn our house down with us inside. She waved the gun between my dad and me, and I stared at the floor drain and tried not to cry. A car went by on the street, and she flinched, then looked at me again. "That's your boy?" "Good, obedient kid. Could have been mine if you hadn't run," she said. "Leave him out of it," Dad said. "I'll sign whatever you want." Just leave. Lindy pulled a folded paper from her jacket and tossed it on the hood. "You're signing this acknowledgement of debt," she said. "Then you're calling the bank and wiring my money." Dad said he didn't have it. He said he only had $3,000 in his account. She laughed and said he would start with that today, and the rest by Friday, or she would make good on the threat. Dad asked if he could wash the oil off his hands so he wouldn't smear the paper. Slow, she said. He wiped his palms on a rag while she stood there with the pistol and the paper on the hood next to the socket set. I didn't understand most of it, only that she hated my dad. He told me later who she was. He dated Lindy in 2006 when he was 28 and she was 31. They met at a laundromat on Maple Street. She made normal things sound like plans. She offered to help with a budget, said he worked too hard to track numbers. First she reconciled his account, then kept his cards for safekeeping, then had his paycheck routed to an account for taxes. Each step sounded responsible if you didn't see the pattern. He was a long-haul trucker, gone up to 2 weeks at a time. While he was out, she handled everything. When he came home, she gave him pocket cash and told him the rest was locked into goals. If he questioned a charge, she would say, "You were gone. I fixed it." If he asked for a card, she would say, "You lose stuff." It worked until a bank manager asked him to confirm a savings account closure he hadn't authorized. That was when he realized nothing was in his name anymore. He didn't run right away. He tried to get the accounts back, but every alert went to her phone. He tried talking it out at the laundromat where they met. She told him if he moved a dime back, she'd call his dispatcher and report him for fuel theft. That was the lever. He packed a bag, left town with what cash he had, changed jobs, met my mom later, and never said Lindy's name around us. Hearing that at 18 explained why he looked the way he did in the garage. Back in the garage, he nodded at the paper. "I'll sign," he said. Lindy told me to keep my hands where she could see them. Dad picked up a rag, wiped his palms, and asked for a pen. She clicked one out and set it on the hood, metal tip toward him like a second weapon. He reached slowly, eyes on hers, while the paper sat next to the socket set. I watched his fingers go flat on the steel so they wouldn't shake. Lindy leaned in, the muzzle dipping toward the contract, while she demanded receipts for every purchase. Dad tried leaving her 3 times, but she always found ways to trap him. The first time she threatened to accuse him of domestic violence with fake photos. He believed her because she'd forged things before. The second time she blocked his cards and emptied his cash while he hauled. He came home to a note in his lockbox that read, "You can't outwork debt." Only on the third attempt, in March 2007, did he escape. He took an emergency loan from his brother, rented a room 200 miles away, changed routes, changed numbers, and told no one else. 6 months later, he met my mom, Sarah, at the gas station where she worked nights. He told her he was divorced from chaos, not from a wife, and she laughed. They married fast. I was born in 2008. We moved to Oakville and kept our lives small and simple. Dad never told Mom about Lindy. He thought secrecy was a seatbelt, annoying until needed. He locked down our routines, paid in cash when he could, and stayed off old routes. By 2015, there had been 9 years with no calls, no letters, nothing. So he started to breathe again, finally. But that afternoon, she stood in our garage with a gun like the past had a key. She said he owed her $120,000 and would burn the house if he refused. He kept his hands out, told her to leave me alone, and asked for pen. Then a siren started down the street. A patrol car headed to a neighbor's barbecue fight, which we'd heard earlier. Lindy froze and listened, panic on her face. "You called the cops," she yelled. Dad hadn't touched his phone. She spun, ran through our yard toward the alley, and disappeared. Dad grabbed my elbow and pulled me inside. He locked every door and told me to sit in the kitchen where the windows were small. He called 911 and gave her name, description, and the direction she ran. Mom came home mid-call, saw us on the floor, and went quiet. 2 hours later, a deputy called back. They had found Lindy by the river 15 miles away. She was in her car under a bridge with a bottle of whiskey and a container of sleeping pills beside her purse. Officers broke the window and pulled her out before she swallowed. Paramedics took her in. Detectives came to our house that night and took statements. Dad showed them the paper she threw, the pen, and the oil rags with his fingerprints smeared across the hood. They photographed everything fast, then told us to call if we saw her car anywhere near. Court moved slow. Dad testified with his hands folded tight. Mom explained the photos she had posted and how she locked everything down after. Lindy's lawyer talked about stress and loss and dependence. The judge still gave 5 years, plus psychiatric treatment, for home invasion, threats, and attempted extortion charges. The restraining order was permanent. After sentencing, Dad told Mom everything, from the laundromat on Maple Street to garage. He apologized for years of silence. She said, "You kept us safe. That's what matters." Lindy was paroled in 2018, moved out of state, and we never heard from her again. I was 7 and only understood the siren, the gun, and my dad's hands shaking over a paper. Now I get the rest. Control can look like help until it closes. We were lucky. I check locks, watch what we share, and keep tools close. I still see that hood. So, when I was 24, I moved into this apartment building in Austin. Neighbors usually kept to themselves, just polite nods in the hallway. Natalie moved in across the hall 9 months before this. First thing I noticed was her smile. Bright, a little shy. We started talking by the mailboxes, then she invited me for coffee. She worked from home as a graphic designer and was into photography. 3 weeks in, we were officially dating. I won't lie, it was convenient. Your girlfriend living basically 6 feet from your door. 6 weeks later, I started noticing how jealous she got. If I had dinner with coworkers, she wanted a full roll call. Names, roles, who sat where. If I didn't text back right away, she'd get mad, then apologize with a long message about communication. I told myself it was early days, new relationship nerves, all that. Still, I found myself typing out explanations for stuff that didn't need explaining. When she asked to see photos on my phone, because I love seeing your day, I said no, and she went cold for an entire evening, then cried and said she was scared of being cheated on. Her ex, long story apparently. I tried to be patient. We set some boundaries. It helped for about a week. 2 months in, I broke up with her. I told her we needed space, that it wasn't working. Natalie took it too calmly. She nodded, said, "I understand," and closed her door. First week after that was steady. We passed in the hall, exchanged stiff nods, no drama. On a Thursday morning, leaving for work, I found a white envelope on my doormat. No name, no note. Inside was a Google Maps printout. The exact route I drove to work the day before, with timestamps. That's it. I knocked on Natalie's door and asked if she'd left something weird at my place. She did a surprised head tilt, said no, and shut the door. I stood there a second, because if it was a prank, it was specific. I told myself it could be someone in the building mixed up doors. Not a great theory. I took the printout with me, stuck it in my bag, tried to focus at work. That night, nothing else happened. I locked my door twice and slept fine. 2 days later, another envelope. This time, it was a receipt from a pizza place where I'd had lunch on Wednesday. I had tossed it in the office trash, 100% sure of that, and now it was flattened smooth and sitting at my door. I went very still. I checked my car, my apartment, the hallway camera near the elevator. It was just a black dome, no way to check footage. That afternoon, another envelope showed up while I was still at work. A photo of my car in the mall parking lot from Saturday, taken from a distance. I started tracking what I threw away and where. I began putting my trash in a lidded bin I kept inside my locked car so I could control what left my hands. I watched for tails, checked mirrors, varied routes, drove past my building before circling back. The envelopes kept coming every other day. A movie ticket stub I'd tossed after a late show. A candy bar wrapper from the gas station. A small sticky note with a grocery list I'd lost at the gym. No demands, no message. Just proof that whoever it was close enough to touch my life in stupid little ways. It was like someone was tapping the glass. I bought a peephole camera with recording. Looked like a normal viewer from the hall but had storage inside. I didn't announce it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to spook whoever it was into changing tactics. I installed it on a Sunday afternoon, tested it with my phone, and set the motion alerts to silent. That night, nothing. Next night, nothing. I considered briefly talking to building management or the police, but what would I say? Someone is returning my trash to me? I figured if I could catch who was doing it, then I'd have something concrete. I started going to bed earlier and setting an alarm for 3:30 a.m. to check the app and then go back to sleep. The first 2 nights were clear. On the third, around 4:12 a.m., I woke up without the alarm, just that snap-awake feeling, checked the feed, and saw a motion clip waiting. I played it. Hood up, baggy sweatshirt, head down. The shape was familiar in the way routines are familiar. Same shoulders, same way of standing with weight on one hip. The person crouched, slid an envelope against my door with 2 fingers so it wouldn't scrape, then stayed there an extra beat like they were listening. I watched the clip 3 times before I tapped to freeze the frame where she reached up to adjust the hood, and I caught part of her face from the side. Natalie. She glanced once at my peephole. My normal peephole, not the camera lens below it, then turned and walked back down the hall in socks, shoes in her hand, slow and quiet. It was 4 in the morning. She'd waited for the hour where I'd be deepest asleep. She knew my schedule well enough to know that. I stared at the paused frame until the screen dimmed. Then I looked down at the envelope at my feet and didn't touch it. I rewound the clip and watched her come and go again. Natalie was smart. She came in a hoodie at 4 in the morning when I was asleep. I went to the building manager, but she said there wasn't much she could do. No threats, no property damage, and the camera clip just showed a tenant in a hoodie in a common hallway. She suggested I document everything and offered to forward any complaints in writing. I called the non-emergency police line and a patrol car came by. The officer listened, flipped through the stack of envelopes, and said without a direct threat or trespass inside my unit, it was weird, but not criminal. He gave me a case number anyway. I thought about moving. I found a couple listings, ran the numbers, and it pissed me off that I was supposed to uproot because she wouldn't let go. The rent was good. My commute was simple. My brother lived 20 minutes away. I told myself I'd hold ground and control what I could. The envelope slowed to once a week, then every 10 days, but the contents got worse. One had a photo of my brother outside his office, taken from across the street. She'd never met him. Another was a printout of my old LinkedIn with high school details I'd forgotten I'd listed years back. There was a page from a people search site with addresses I hadn't lived at since I was a kid. It felt like she'd shifted from, "I'm watching you now," to, "I know where you came from." I kept my routine tight. I told my brother to keep an eye out and not to engage with strangers asking about me. I froze my credit, added 2-factor to everything, set alerts on my cards. I stopped posting anything real-time and scrubbed my socials. I hated how defensive it made me. but doing something felt better than waiting. I tried talking to Natalie once in daylight, in the hall, just to set a boundary like adults. I said, "This needs to stop." She looked past my shoulder and said, calm as ever, "I'm not doing anything." I told her I had video. She blinked and said, "Okay," in this flat way, and closed her door. I stood there with my key in my hand and realized she would never admit it until someone else forced her to. That weekend I left town overnight, stayed at my brother's, and when I got back there was nothing at my door. I thought maybe it was ending. Then another envelope appeared a few days later. A cropped photo of me at the pharmacy counter, time-stamped. 3 weeks ago, on a Sunday, I woke up to a big manila envelope on the mat. Heavy. No handwriting. Inside was a hardcover book, like something you'd order from one of those photo print services. The front had a date range, the last 6 weeks. I opened it and felt my hands go numb. Page 1 was a Monday. A strip of photos of me leaving my apartment. A screenshot of my calendar entry for a client call. A printed snippet of a text I'd sent a friend about lunch. Page 2 was Tuesday. My gym check-in screen. A street photo of me crossing to the parking garage. A cropped frame of me at the ATM. It kept going day by day. Some pages had my old posts printed and circled. Some had screenshots from conversations that weren't public. There were lab results from a clinic. Nothing dramatic, but private. And I still don't know how she got them. The layout was clean, consistent, like a portfolio. The last page was blank except for one line centered on it. "You thought you knew me. But I know you better. I called 911. I didn't care if it sounded dramatic. 2 officers showed up, then a detective later. I showed them the album, the prior envelopes, the peephole clip, and I gave them Natalie's name. They talked to her for a long time. I sat on my couch with the door open and listened to low voices in the hall. When they came back, they said she admitted to collecting the materials to understand what went wrong. No direct threats, but the volume and intrusion changed it. They took the album as evidence. I filed for a protective order the next day, and the judge granted a temporary one quickly, then a longer one after a hearing. The manager documented it and warned her that any violation would mean police involvement. She didn't look at me in the hearing. She stared at the table. I kept my answers short and factual. Now there's an order that says she can't contact me, can't come within a set distance, which makes the hallway awkward and pushes the line of what enforcement even looks like. She still lives across the hall. I changed my routines again, added a second lock, and I'm on a wait list to transfer units. I reported the medical breach to the clinic. My brother walks to his car with a coworker. It's quieter. No more envelopes. That should feel like normal. It doesn't. I keep thinking about that book and how she built it without ever needing to talk to me, just by picking up the pieces I left around. I'm careful now in ways I should have been before, and I hate that I learned it like this. So, when I was 26, I met this guy William at a coffee shop near the veterinary clinic where I worked as an assistant. He was 28, streamed games on Twitch, about 40,000 followers, he said twice. He was attentive in a goofy way, asked about spay recoveries, remembered a golden retriever named Muffin. He started timing his car to my shift and offering rides, which felt generous back then. We started dating at the end of March. The first 3 weeks were simple: noodles, Mario Kart, him doing a fake announcer voice. Then he mentioned me on stream, not my name. "I'm dating a veterinarian." I corrected him later. He waved it off. His mods, 5 or 6 regulars, flooded chat with "she'll use you" and "bad PR move." He laughed and said they were jealous. I asked him to tell them to knock it off. "Babe, the internet is harsh. You gotta be tougher." By the next day, my Instagram had DMs from mod accounts. By the next week, insults on every post, then new accounts when I blocked. He did nothing. After 6 weeks, I ended it. He just shrugged, "Okay, whatever," and unpaused his game. I thought it would die there, but a week later, his head mod, Kyle, brought a limping dachshund to the clinic. Perfectly healthy exam. He asked, too casually, "Do your shifts change much? You here on weekends?" He came back twice that month with different pets and invented symptoms. All healthy. I told our administrator. She said unless he harassed staff, we couldn't refuse care. Then someone with the username VetStalker posted our schedule corkboard inside William's Discord. She leaves at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. That picture wasn't public. I started leaving through the main entrance near the guard, changed routes, called friends as I walked. We removed our clinic schedules from social profiles. It felt like trying to hold shut a door with a draft blowing under it. After that, I stopped walking the same way 2 days in a row. I asked a tech to walk me to my bus some nights. Other nights, I got a ride share and had it drop me 2 blocks away from my place. I filed a report with Discord using screenshots. Nothing happened, or if it did, I never heard. One Thursday, I stayed late for surgery till 9. An ambulance blocked the main exit, so I went out the back service door to circle to the front. 3 men in black masks and gloves were waiting in the lot. 2 grabbed my arms, the 3rd covered my mouth. I twisted and tried to bite. He said, almost chipper, "Don't." They shoved me into a gray van with no rear windows, zip-tied my wrists, slammed the doors, and the driver punched it. I tried to scream through my nose and kick the wall. One of them held a phone up like he was showing me a meme. A timer was counting down from 30 minutes with the caption, "Challenge accepted." I stared because I didn't understand. The van smelled like energy drinks and pizza. They barely spoke, just laughed when I fought against the ties. We drove about 20 minutes, then stopped. They slid the door open to a warehouse yard. A tripod and camera were already set up, red record light on. That's when it clicked. They were making a video. As they pulled me toward camera, one of them said like a host, "30 minutes to win, boys." Another said, "Say hi, vet girl." He sounded young. I kept my eyes closed and counted breaths, 4 in, 4 out. The way we tell anxious owners to calm their dogs. He nudged my shoulder like he was checking if I'd wake. I went limp like I'd passed out. It wasn't acting. My legs were shaking anyway. 2 of them eased their grips to adjust me so I'd look good for their shot. I snapped forward, yanked my arms, and sprinted. Gravel bit through my flats, but I didn't look down. I bolted out of the van, cut hard left, and dove behind a metal shipping container at the edge of the lot, holding my breath. They started yelling at each other, "Where is she?" and "You were supposed to hold her." I pressed my back against the container and pulled my sleeve over my wrist. They hadn't noticed my smartwatch. I whispered the emergency phrase and felt the haptic buzz confirm the call. The operator asked if I could speak. I said, "Warehouse yard, 3 men in masks, gray van," as quietly as I could, and muted. I stayed low and didn't move. One of them jogged past, breathing hard, then doubled back and paused a few feet away. I pressed myself lower and waited. 8 minutes later, I heard sirens and saw lights splash across the yard. A loudspeaker told everyone to get on the ground and keep their hands visible. They panicked and split, which made it easier for the officers rushing in. One tried to climb into the van and got yanked out and cuffed. Another got dragged off the tripod with the camera still recording. The 3rd ran toward the office and got pinned against a pallet stack. An officer found me, cut the zip ties, and asked, "You the caller?" I nodded and pointed at the camera setup in the gray van. They pulled the masks. Kyle, then Brad, then William, staring like I had ruined his big moment. He kept saying, "It's content, Rachel. It's just content." Like that explained anything. Officers searched the van and took their phones. On William's phone, they opened a document titled Prank Script Final. It listed steps. Grab Rachel after work, take her to warehouse, film reaction, release after an hour. There were time boxes, camera angles, and a note to blur plates. He told the officers, "All YouTubers do this. It's a prank." And he sounded sincere. They booked all three for kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment, and the DA added organizing a crime for him. After the hearings, he got 4 years. Kyle and Brad got 2 years probation with mandatory evaluations. Local news ran the story, and his channel was banned everywhere after the arrest. The trial made me rethink how I look at online personalities and their crowds. His lawyer argued the gun was fake, so it proved they didn't plan to hurt me. The prosecutor said I had no way to know that, and the terror was real. Kyle testified that William got the idea after watching other streamers push extreme pranks for millions of views. He said scaring an ex would be hilarious content and boost a dying channel. The judge called it one of the most disturbing cases he'd seen because they truly didn't understand it was a crime. They thought internet fame excused anything, including kidnapping someone after work. I spent months in therapy, learning to drive again without scanning every mirror like a hunted person. I still flinch at vans without windows in parking lots and avoid warehouses. The worst part is knowing that if the watch battery had died, or if reception dropped, they might have filmed me for hours. They would have edited my fear into jump cuts and sponsors and called it entertainment. 6 months after sentencing, I moved to another city, changed jobs, and deleted every social profile. I use a nickname for deliveries and tell new coworkers I don't do social media. Sometimes I wonder how many others got dragged into pranks that were actually crimes and didn't report. Shame covers a lot, and fear covers the rest. I keep thinking about the moment he looked at me and said it was just content, like that erased responsibility. It didn't, and it never will. So when I was 32, I decided to get back into shape after my divorce. Just wanted to feel good about myself again and clear my head. I joined this CrossFit gym in July 2022. It was close to my apartment and had good reviews. Nothing fancy, just a solid place to work out. Tyler worked there as a trainer, 27, and he immediately paid attention to me. Free consultations. Stay after class, I'll show you a better deadlift. That kind of thing. We started dating in mid-August. The first 2 weeks were good. He was attentive and funny, remembered my meetings, texted good luck before them. Then he started commenting on everything I ate. If I ordered pasta, he'd say, "Do you really need all those carbs?" Like I was 12. If I had a glass of wine, "Alcohol kills your progress," with this disappointed look that shut me up. He kept pushing his protein supplements, $80 a bottle, and said I'd never see results without them. He'd send me screenshots of my progress with notes on what to tighten up. I told him I felt uncomfortable with the constant monitoring. He said, "I just care about your transformation." Most people give up, like I was a project he owned. By the end of September, he called my lunch garbage and told me I was sabotaging myself. I said, "We're done," and left him standing in the parking lot, arms out, like I owed him an explanation beyond that. I thought breaking up would be the end. I switched to morning classes to avoid his evening shifts. He still showed up. He'd stand outside the front window while I ran, arms crossed, staring through the glass instead of working. I started going to a yoga studio 3 miles away to get some separation. Within a week, he had a membership and put his mat right beside mine, every class, like it was assigned seating. The instructor said, "Partner stretches," and I stood up to move and he said, "I'll partner with you." Like that was normal. I stopped going. On weekends, I ran in the park and saw his car, the silver Dodge Charger, parked at the same entrance. When I changed my route, I'd see him again a few days later, idling near a different trailhead. I started clocking license plates to make sure I wasn't imagining it. At work, my coworker Denise said during lunch, "Isn't that the same Charger across the street every day?" I looked out the window and there he was, in the driver's seat, phone in his hand, watching the doors. I started eating at my desk. It didn't matter. He still parked there. Denise took a photo one day and asked if I knew him. I said he was my ex. She said I should call the police. I said, "He's not doing anything." And I hated how true that sounded because it meant no one would actually stop him. In November, I signed up with a new dietitian, Dr. Chen, across town. Clean start, no judgment, just data and a plan. On my third appointment, I walked into the waiting room, and Tyler was sitting there reading a magazine like it was the dentist. He said, "Just wanted to improve my meal plan," with a smile that made my skin go cold. I turned around, went outside, and canceled all the rest from the parking lot. 2 weeks later, I went to my massage therapist, someone I'd been seeing for 2 years and never mentioned to anyone, including him. He was at the counter booking his first session, chatting with the receptionist. I waited in the hallway until he left. Then I asked her how he'd found it. She said, "He called yesterday asking if we're taking new clients." She shrugged. Nothing was weird to her. I got to my car and opened every social app. He joined my running group, Running Moms Unite. Even though I'm not a mom, just a runner who liked the meetups. He'd followed my book club page on Instagram. He'd joined the hiking group I'd only just found last month. Different name, blurry profile, but the more I looked, the more it was obviously him. The dog in a photo was the same dog he'd told me belonged to his sister. The gym shoes matched a pair he'd bragged about getting on discount. I checked the group chat members and saw his fake account drop in little comments. "What time do you all usually meet? Anyone run the lake loop?" Just enough to learn my routines. I scrolled and found he'd reacted to a photo of my trail shoes in the hiking group. Just a thumbs up, nothing that would ping me. He knew where I'd be and when because I'd told those groups without thinking. I went through my followers list and realized he'd been there the whole time, watching. I felt sick realizing how deep this went, how he'd infiltrated every corner of my life without me noticing until it was everywhere. The worst part came in April 2023 when I registered for a city marathon, my first half after 6 months of training. It mattered to me after the divorce. Finish something hard, finish it alone. I registered, booked a hotel near the start, told only 2 close friends because I wanted it quiet. A week before the race, I got an email from the organizers with the course map and a link to the entry list. His name was there. Tyler Coleman. Same age group, same pace bracket. I stared at it long enough that my browser went to sleep. I called the hotel to double-check my reservation, and the guy at the desk wouldn't tell me anything. But Mia, my friend who works at the Hampton on Maple, looked it up on her end and said, "He reserved a room 1 floor above you. Same check-in, same checkout." I felt my face go hot and stupid. I asked, "What name?" She said, "His real name." No guesswork. Mia came over that night with her laptop and started walking me through my accounts. We found the fake profile in my running Facebook group and on Meetup. Same blurry dog photo, different name, but the posts were specific. He'd RSVP'd to the race training run I'd mentioned. He'd asked about preferred hotels near the corrals. He had access to the group spreadsheet with bib pickups and hotel blocks because I had access. I went to the bathroom and threw up so hard I had to sit on the floor. My hands were shaking when I came back. Mia said, "We lock everything down now." We kicked the fake account from every group we controlled. I changed my email and passwords. I called the race and asked to withdraw. The woman said, "Are you injured?" I said, "Safety thing." She was kind, but it didn't change anything. I moved to a different hotel under a different name, then didn't go at all. Instead, I went to the police with a folder and asked for help. The officer heard me out, took notes, and then gave me the line I expected. Public places. He hasn't threatened you. Document everything. He didn't say it cruelly. It just didn't solve anything. So I documented. I took photos of his car outside my office and time-stamped them. I saved screenshots of the fake profiles and his comments in my groups. I asked Denise and my boss to write statements about seeing his Charger by the building. I pulled phone logs for the calls he made to my massage place. I emailed the gym manager a factual summary about him standing at the window and got their reply on record. Every piece felt ridiculous and also necessary. I told myself if I stacked it high enough, someone would finally do something. I told myself I'd finish a different race, later, when he wasn't watching. Summer 2023. I started dating Daniel from the neighboring department. We kept it quiet because office dating is messy, and I didn't want Tyler looping into it. Someone saw us leave together one night. 2 days later, I got a DM from a new account. "Saw you're dating someone. Hope he knows you can't handle pressure." My mouth went dry. I showed Daniel. He said, "Block and document." And I did. That week, he told me Tyler showed up at his gym and started casual talk like they were old friends, asking about mutual acquaintances, and then sliding my name in. Daniel said it felt like Tyler was measuring him. Then Tyler followed him on LinkedIn and commented on a post about a project Daniel led. Nothing overt, just interesting pivot. And Daniel blocked him there too. I stopped keeping it to myself. I told everyone at work what had been happening. Rachel, who's a lawyer and also my friend, started the restraining order process with me. We built a clean timeline with dates and photos and witness statements. I asked building security to save camera footage where his car sat across from our doors. They pulled it and gave Rachel a copy. I moved to a different apartment. I didn't tell anyone the address except Rachel and Daniel. I bought blackout curtains, not because I cared about sleep, but because I didn't want someone to see my lamps turning on and off. I switched to home workouts and outdoor runs only with friends. I deleted every public profile. I kept one private account and let Rachel audit it. It's been 8 months since the last confirmed incident. The restraining order is still processing. That word makes me angry in a dull way because it stretches time and doesn't protect anything. Tyler hasn't done anything the system calls serious, which is a strange word for something that makes you map the exits of every room. I still check my rearview mirror when I leave a parking lot. I still flinch when a silver Charger merges near me, even if it's not the right model year. I still memorize the faces at my grocery store for a beat too long. I keep my address off every form unless it's legally required. Daniel and I are planning to move to another city by the end of the year. I already found a job there, and it feels like the only way to start living normally again. So for context, I was 28 and working as a sales manager at a mid-sized IT company when Brandon from marketing seemed interesting at our September product launch party. We'd worked in the same building for 2 years, but on different floors, so it felt low risk at first. He was funny, roasted the same corporate buzzwords I did, and when he suggested drinks the following week, I said yes. The first 6 weeks were easy. Movies, a couple concerts in the next town over, dinners he cooked at his place that were surprisingly good. Then he started nudging at who I talked to. First, it was jokes. Jeff from IT support, standing at your desk too long. My colleague Tom, looking at you the wrong way. Then one night he asked to use my phone browser to find a restaurant. My battery died, and I watched him scroll through my messages. I said, "Hey, that's not okay." He said people in relationships have nothing to hide, and didn't speak to me for 2 days. I told myself he was stressed. In early December, I tried to end it. I said we should stay friends and not mix work with personal life. He looked calm, weirdly calm, said he understood, asked for a week to process, and promised everything would stay professional. I believed him because I wanted to keep the job simple and my life quiet. 3 days later, I had a big presentation for a potential client I'd spent a week building. An hour before the meeting, I opened my file, and half the slides were gone. Graphs replaced with empty frames, key text erased. I pulled a printed older version out of my drawer and improvised around it, but it looked sloppy. The client called it unprofessional, and we lost the contract. Roger, my boss, held a debrief the same afternoon. It checked the edit history. Last changes were from my workstation at 11 p.m. the night before. I was at home. Someone had used my login. Brandon was one of 3 people who knew my credentials. I'd given him access a month earlier when he helped me fix formatting on a different deck. Nothing was provable, so I got written up for careless password management. I changed everything: network, email, file share, even my voicemail PIN. I told myself that was the end of it. The next week, he accidentally hit my Honda Civic in the parking lot. He said, "Didn't see it while backing up," at 3 p.m. in bright sun. Cameras showed him sitting in his SUV for a few minutes facing my car, then starting and reversing into it. HR didn't say much. Legal mailed insurance details. His insurer paid, but my car was in the shop for 2 weeks, and I took the commuter bus, trying not to make eye contact with him when we overlapped at the lobby doors. I started seeing Alex, a financial analyst in our office. We kept it quiet. Separate calendars, separate doors. Within a week, Brandon approached me in the cafeteria, and loud enough for 2 nearby tables, said if I wanted to sleep around, that was my business, but I shouldn't pretend to be respectable. I said, "Leave." He stood over the table and started in about women dumping decent guys for men with money. 2 coworkers stepped in. One of them literally put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Not here." I went straight to HR. Jennifer from HR called us both in. In the meeting, Brandon looked wrecked but rehearsed, talked about an emotional breakdown after the breakup, and promised to keep his distance. Jennifer gave him a written warning and said the next incident meant termination. I nodded because I wanted a paper trail, not a scene. After the meeting, I got a text from an unknown number. It was multiple intimate photos of me and Brandon from 3 months earlier at his house. The message said, "Do you want your new boyfriend and the whole office to see these?" I stared at the screen until my hands shook. I didn't respond. I blocked the number and deleted the photos from my camera roll again, even though I knew that wasn't the point. For the next week, every time Slack pinged, I felt sick. I checked our company LinkedIn like it could explode. Alex already knew the background. He said, "We can go to the police together." Revenge porn laws exist for this, I know. I drafted an email to an attorney twice and didn't send it. I kept thinking about escalation, screenshots blasted into team channels, clients alerted, my name tied to it forever. And I told Alex I needed a day. He said he'd support whatever I wanted. I went home, closed my blinds, turned off red receipts, and hoped Brandon would calm down. The next 3 weeks he ignored me, didn't look at me in hallways, acted like I didn't exist. I almost relaxed, like maybe the warning stuck. Mid-January, Jennifer from HR put an urgent on my calendar with Roger, our department director, and a legal rep I'd never met. They showed me an email sent from Brandon's corporate address to general management and HR. He claimed I'd used my position to coerce him into a relationship, threatened to ruin his reputation if he refused, and after the breakup, I'd sabotaged his projects and turned coworkers against him. Attached were edited screenshots of our messages, cropped so my replies looked aggressive, stripped of his lines that started the fights. I spent 3 hours walking through the real timeline. I opened full threads, pointed out dates, noted who was present in the cafeteria blow-up, repeated exactly when my deck got corrupted. They brought in 2 co-workers who'd seen the cafeteria scene, and they backed me up. The company opened an internal investigation. I was pulled from major projects pending review, which meant sitting on low-stakes tasks while everyone avoided eye contact. Brandon kept working like nothing happened. I'd see him in the corridor and he'd give me this small smile, like he'd already won. A week later, Jennifer called me back. The investigation found his accusations baseless. Witnesses confirmed my version, and IT found signs the screenshots were manipulated. Mismatched fonts, broken metadata. HR scheduled a final meeting with him to deliver the result. Jennifer read the conclusion in a conference room with glass walls. His claims were false and defamatory, and he was terminated effective immediately. He went from blank to shouting in one breath. He stood, yelled that I'd ruined his career, then grabbed a chair and hurled it at the wall. It hit drywall and bounced. He swung his fist into the edge of the table, and the glass spidered. He called me a manipulative bitch and said everyone would see who I really was. Security was already in the hallway. Someone had messaged them when his voice spiked. They called the police and escorted him out while he kept talking, not even looking at where he was going. His personal items were boxed and couriered to him the next day. I thought, okay, that has to be it. A month later, a mutual acquaintance messaged me that Brandon was telling people he'd been illegally fired on false charges and that he'd restored justice. I didn't answer the gossip. I filed for a temporary restraining order. The judge signed it. No approach to me, my home, or my workplace. My company offered a transfer to another office in the same state with a promotion. They framed it as recognition plus space from the situation. I didn't want to uproot everything, but the alternative was waiting for him to show up in the parking lot again. I accepted and moved in April. Alex tried, but the distance and the constant stress just flattened us. We broke up after 2 months. No drama. We stayed on decent terms. In the new office, I kept my head down for a while. Kevin from Analytics started helping me with pipeline forecasts. Nothing personal, just work. We got coffee after a late meeting and talked through a budget problem, and it didn't feel like a setup. 6 months after my move, we started dating, slowly. He was patient. He got why I didn't want to rush trust or merge calendars or leave anything at his place. Time passed. Almost 3 years now. I'm still at the company. 2 more promotions. I live in a quiet suburb where I know the neighbor's dog's name but not theirs, which I'm fine with. Last week I checked LinkedIn requests and saw a new profile with no photo. Minimal info. One connection we both had years ago. The employment timeline matched Brandon's, and there was a bullet point only he used when he bragged about a campaign. I recognized him. I hit block without opening it. I still keep screenshots, backups, and a paper folder with dates and names. I don't live scared, but I live prepared. Strong passwords, no shared logins, HR on speed dial, a plan if something starts to smell off. People like Brandon count on you being too embarrassed to push back. If anyone reading this is in that early, this feels wrong but maybe I'm overreacting stage, you're not. Document everything. Tell your people, make it official, and when you see his name pop up again, don't engage. Block and keep walking. During the summer of 2019, I bought a house in the suburbs outside Portland with my wife Jessica. We lived there for 3 years before everything started to fall apart. Constant fights, long silences, cold looks. She wanted kids. I wasn't ready. And that was the last straw. The divorce was relatively calm. She packed her things, left the keys on the kitchen table, and drove to her sister in Seattle. I stayed in the house alone. The first months were quiet, almost too quiet. The house felt larger without her, and my footsteps bounced off empty rooms. I got used to the silence and even started to appreciate it. By fall, I had a routine. Work, gym, microwave dinners. I fixed a leaky faucet, cleaned the gutters, kept the lawn neat because it felt like proof I was handling things. If a night got heavy, I put on a game and let the commentators fill the space. I told myself I'd earned the calm. No drama, no sudden plans. Just me and a house that behaved. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Late at night, after I turned off the TV and lay in bed, there'd be soft shuffling underneath me. Like someone nudging a chair with a hip or sliding a box a few inches. I blamed old plumbing or raccoons in the vents. It's a 90s build, nothing special. Houses make noise. Then food started disappearing faster than made sense. A jar of peanut butter that should have lasted a week was low in 3 days. I told myself I'd been eating mindlessly. I stopped buying junk, then watched the same thing happen to staples I don't overeat. Rice, bread, coffee. One morning I went into the hall bathroom and the shower tiles were still wet. I hadn't showered since the previous evening. My towel hung differently, the edge twisted like someone had wrung it too hard. I stood there touching it, trying to match the damp with a timeline. I checked windows, the back slider, the garage entry. Everything was locked the way I leave it. I told myself condensation can linger. Then I changed the code on the alarm and set it every night. After that, I started checking the house more carefully. Before bed, I walked the perimeter, tested window sashes, tugged deadbolts, waited for the alarm chirp. In the morning, I did quick scans for anything off. The alarm never tripped. Still, the sounds kept coming. Sometimes at night, sometimes during the day based on how things looked when I got home. A stack of mail slightly shifted. A remote I always leave on the coffee table ending up on the couch arm. I bought a small camera and mounted it in the living room facing the hallway. The motion clips were boring. Just me grabbing coffee, me leaving for work, me coming back, nothing else. A week later, on lunch, I told a coworker. He forked salad, chewed, then said, "Check your basement. That's where critters get in. Or people." He grinned when he said people, then stopped grinning when I didn't. Seriously, vents, crawl space, any exterior access, I hardly ever went down there. The basement was unfinished. Old boxes, the water heater, the furnace, a folding table with paint cans from the last owner. That evening, right after work, I grabbed a flashlight and went down. The air felt stale, detergent mixed with dust. I swept the beam across the concrete floor and paused. The dust wasn't even. There were faint smudged paths, not footprints exactly, more like long brushed arcs where something had been dragged or where someone had shuffled around, trying to leave as little trace as possible. I followed the brightest of those dull streaks, past the breaker panel and a stack of moving boxes I hadn't opened since the split. I moved slower. Along the back wall, where the foundation met a short run of studs, something I didn't recognize sat against the cinder block. A metal cot. Old military style, the olive fabric sagging. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to build a memory that would make it mine. I couldn't. I would have noticed a cot. That much was certain. On top of it was a neatly folded blanket. Not one of mine. A cheap gray fleece, folded the way you'd fold it right before leaving for a few hours. Next to the cot, propped against the wall, sat a plastic bottle of water with the cap screwed on crooked. It was half empty. I went upstairs, locked the basement door, and called the police. My voice sounded flat, explaining the cot and the bottle. Dispatch told me to wait outside, so I stood in the driveway with the porch light on and kept my eyes on the garage. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later, asked the usual questions, then cleared the main floor and the bedrooms. We went down together. They swept corners, checked behind the furnace, opened boxes I hadn't touched in years. Nothing moved. No one answered when they called out. They didn't look surprised. One officer knelt, ran a finger across the floor dust, and showed me the gray smear on his glove. "Someone's using this space," he said. "How are they getting in?" I told him the windows were sealed and the alarm covered the back slider and front door. He kept looking. He tracked the smudges with his flashlight, slow and patient, like he was following a trail only he could see. He asked who else had keys. I said not many. He pointed at the garage wall. "Sometimes there's a service door from the old build." "People forget them." I said I didn't have one. He walked the perimeter, palmed the metal shelving by the water heater, and it shifted a hair. "Give me a hand." We slid it out 6 inches, then a foot. Behind it was a wooden door I had never noticed. It was old, the paint tired, and it sat a little open. No alarm contact. He nudged it, and it swung to a short passage straight to the garage. We followed the scuffed dust into the garage. The side door to the yard had 2 locks, an old deadbolt and the newer keypad I use daily. The officer thumbed the deadbolt. "If someone still has this key, the keypad means nothing." He asked who might have an old key. I said my ex-wife, maybe the previous owner's handyman, maybe the lawn guy from years back. I didn't know. He wrote it down, photographed the hidden door, and told me not to touch the cot or anything near it. He offered to set surveillance. I said yes. They left a motion sensor in the basement and a small camera facing the garage side door. The officer handed me a card and told me not to confront anyone, even if I recognized them. I slept on the couch with the lights on. The house stayed still. In the morning, the officers texted they wanted one more night. I said okay and went to work, trying to act normal while thinking about that folded blanket and the crooked cap on the bottle. The next night, they parked down the block. I kept the house dark and sat at the kitchen table with my phone face up. Close to midnight, my screen lit. Movement at garage door. I didn't move. A soft knock came, not at the front, at the interior door from the garage. The knob turned once, then stopped. Another text. "We're at the garage. Stay put." I sat there counting breaths until I heard the officers identify themselves. Quick footsteps. A low voice I knew even before I heard her name. "Please don't make a scene," Jessica said. They walked her into the kitchen. She had a grocery bag with canned soup, bread, cheap shampoo. She looked small. "I wasn't stealing," she said, more to the table than to us. They sat her down. She answered every question. After the divorce, she lost her job, then her apartment, bounced between friends, then remembered the unalarmed service door. She still had the old deadbolt key on a ring she forgot to give back. She showered at night. She took food but planned to replace it. The officers looked at me like it was my call. I asked if charges were required. They said no, as long as she left and I documented the security issues. Jessica cried a little, wiped her face with her sleeve. "I thought I'd be gone once I found work," she said. I told them I wouldn't press charges. I asked her for the key. She set it on the table. I changed every lock the next morning, had the keypad rekeyed, replaced the side door deadbolt, and screwed 2 boards across the hidden basement door behind the shelving. After they left, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to line up the person I loved with the person living under my feet. There isn't a clean way to hold both at once. I kept the incident report in a drawer and boxed the camera. I don't keep extra keys now. I check the door behind the shelving even though it's blocked. When the house is quiet, I remember the blanket folded like someone planning to come back, and I hope she never needs to. I met Dennis on a digital art forum called Art Forum in January, when I was 21 and he was 37. He commented on my concept art, long breakdowns about anatomy and composition, and somehow it didn't feel like showing off. He had a portfolio linked, covers for small comic publishers, some book illustrations, photos of a classroom, and he answered my questions like he actually had time. We moved to private messages. We argued about brushes and line weight and whether composition rules were just training wheels. I was at Boston University, second year of grad school for graphic design, and no one there talked to me like that. He did the mentor thing without making me feel dumb. After 10 months of that, he suggested I visit Portland for a month over the summer, see his studio, try a joint project, maybe meet a publisher. My parents said no. I said it was my chance. July came and I flew out. He met me at the airport with flowers like we'd known each other for years. The loft was in some industrial strip, concrete floors, giant windows, 2 big tablets, canvases leaning everywhere. We worked 12-hour days. He showed me workflows I'd never seen, shortcuts that snapped problems in half. It felt like leveling up. The first week, he stood behind my chair and pointed at the screen. By the second, he rested his hand on my shoulder while correcting a line. By the third, he kept it there. I told myself it was nothing. By the last week, he'd lean in so close I could feel his breath when he said, "Almost." Shrink the forearm by 2%. By the end of the month, we were sleeping together. He called me his muse and said I had the kind of raw talent people fake careers around. When it was time to go back to Boston, he asked me to stay. He promised intros, clients, an exhibition before Christmas if you keep this pace. I went back anyway because I'd already paid tuition. I barely lasted 2 weeks. We were on video calls for hours every day. He sent me weekend tickets like it was normal. He told me my graduate program was a waste of time, and I was wasting my best years. In January, I filed for academic leave and moved in with him. I told my parents it was fate, and sounded like I believed it. For 2 months, he was perfect. Breakfast, work, encouragement, late-night ramen. Then he wanted my passwords, so I can help you network smarter. He read my texts and flagged lines he didn't like. If I replied to anyone without telling him, he sulked or snapped. He started calling my style immature and made me redraw until my hands shook. I asked about freelance gigs. He said no client should see me yet. When I suggested meeting local artists, he said they'd use me and he wasn't going to watch that happen. Money was our pool, but it was his teaching checks, and I got a weekly cash envelope. I told myself it was temporary. The rules kept multiplying. He wanted to know when I showered, what I ate, who liked my posts. If I messaged my mom, I had to show him the thread. He said my friends were jealous civilians and my parents were small-town frightened. When I pushed back, he'd go quiet for a day, then come in soft with, "I just don't want you hurt." I stopped arguing because it made work impossible. After 8 months, he started locking the door from the outside when he left. He said he didn't trust the neighborhood, then said he didn't trust me to stay focused if I ran errands. I sat there 6 or 7 hours listening for footsteps in the hallway and the elevator chime. I kept my tablet on my lap, because if he walked in and I wasn't working, he'd stare at the screen, then at me, and ask questions until I cried. I thought about leaving, but I had nothing. No income, no apartment, no savings left after shipping my stuff. In September, he left for a 3-day exhibition in Seattle. He locked the door like normal. I opened his desk to look for tape and found a spare key he'd forgotten to hide. I held it for 5 minutes shaking. Then I packed a backpack with clothes, my tablet, my passport. I took $200 from his wallet because I needed a way home. I walked out and didn't look back until the bus doors closed. At the airport, I bought the cheapest ticket to Boston and texted my mom from the gate. I slept on the plane and woke up crying. My parents met me at arrivals. I'd lost weight. My dad kept saying, "You're safe," like he didn't believe it. For a week, I couldn't stop crying. I slept with the lights on. I kept my phone off because it wouldn't stop lighting up. Dennis called hundreds of times, left voicemails swinging between apologies and threats. He wrote that he'd change, that I'd ruined him, that he'd make me regret ghosting the only person who believed in you. I blocked everything I could think of. I thought it was over. I opened new accounts and started posting little studies and sketches to show I was alive. A month later, he started appearing on all platforms where I tried to rebuild my career. He started showing up as opportunities that felt too good to be real, and then turned out to be traps. A Behance message from a senior art director offering a book cover with a 24-hour turnaround and triple market rate. An ArtStation DM from a game studio wanting character sheets by Monday. A LinkedIn note from a magazine that needed spot illustrations ASAP, can pay today. I said yes because I needed work and because it felt like the universe finally giving me a break. Each time he vanished right before delivery or canceled minutes after I sent finals, claiming I'd missed a spec he'd never mentioned. Then the client pages disappeared. Profiles gone. Dead links. I realized the pattern when a real client emailed me confusion about my apology for missing deadlines I hadn't missed. He'd written them from a look-alike address, said I was unprofessional, said I was stepping back from illustration. I watched a contract evaporate in one thread. I changed my handle, then my display name, then my portfolio layout. I redrew my banner. New email. He found me anyway. Maybe he tracked my style. Maybe he brute-forced my passwords. I started generating alias watermarks and posting from cafes. It didn't matter. A week later, an account with 3 followers would ask for a rush job, and I'd feel my stomach drop. This went on for 2 years. I never got comfortable. Every ping felt like a test I was destined to fail. A month ago, to an address I had created 7 days earlier and told to exactly no one, I got an email with no subject and a single line. "You still belong to me." Attached were photos from that summer in Portland. Things I remembered asking him to delete. Things he had laughed about and said, "Of course." I stared at them until my hands went numb. I moved them into a folder called Legal and closed the laptop. Nothing else came after that, but I woke up every night for a week and searched my name, then closed the search before results loaded, convinced that if I looked, I'd make it real. The worst part is not knowing if he'll push it further. Every time my phone buzzes, I picture those photos on a site I can't get taken down. I changed my art style so hard it almost felt like a different person made it. New name, new color choices, changed my brush pack, the whole thing. I even thought about quitting digital completely and going to something analog he couldn't trace. Charcoal, ink on paper, murals nobody could fake. But that felt like letting him win. My therapist says it's textbook narcissistic control, that the whiplash between "I love you" and "I own you" is the point, that the uncertainty is the weapon. We talked safety plans. We documented everything. I filed 2 reports. The officer was polite but clear. Unless he threatens me directly or shows up at my door, online harassment is hard to act on. He suggested I stay offline, which is like telling a carpenter to avoid wood. I moved states. My parents helped me with the legal name change. I took a day job doing layout in an office with fluorescent lights and calendars on the wall. It pays on Fridays, and nobody asks me to send nudes to prove I'm comfortable with the project tone. I keep my head down and don't mention the art stuff. Sometimes late at night, I scroll through hashtags and see kids, because that's what they are, honestly, posting concept sheets and gushing about mentors DMing them. I want to comment, "Please be careful," but I don't. I don't want to tip him that I'm watching. 2 years in, and I don't feel safe anywhere. Distance doesn't matter to someone whose favorite tool is a login form. Those photos are still on my desktop in that folder because if he ever posts them, I want a timeline and proof. I don't open it. I can't delete it. Some nights I use a burner account and check his pages. He's smiling in group shots, arm around new students, proud teacher captions, studio selfies. Young female artists look into the camera like I used to. I watch the likes go up and wonder if one of them will be his next victim. I met Ethan at a veterans bar in November 2019 when I was 21. He was 4 years older and had done 2 tours in Afghanistan with this heaviness in his eyes I recognized. I'd been volunteering at a veteran support center after my uncle came back from service with a broken mind, so I thought I understood what Ethan was going through. We started dating in December, and he was attentive but weirdly intense, texting me 20 times a day, wanting to know where I was and who I was with, explaining it away as hypervigilance from the army. When I tried spending time with friends, he'd call multiple times per evening with panic attacks, and I'd come home guilty about leaving him alone. By February 2020, he'd convinced me my family didn't understand what he'd been through, and I was the only one who saw him, not the broken soldier everyone else saw. I started seeing my brother Danny and parents less and less, sinking deeper into the role of Ethan's savior, the only person who could keep him from falling apart. He talked about the war in hints and fragments, and I felt special being the one he trusted with his pain. In March 2020, the pandemic started, and isolation made everything worse. We spent the day together in my apartment, and Ethan lost his mechanic job, which ramped up his anxiety. He started threatening suicide when I tried discussing our problems, saying he should have died in Afghanistan, pulling out his bottle of PTSD pills and holding them in his hand, staring at me. I'd call the Veterans Crisis Hotline, but he'd get angry saying I was airing our dirty laundry to strangers who didn't understand what real trauma was like. In June 2020, my brother Danny was killed in a car accident. Drunk driver hit him on I-75 near Toledo, and he died instantly. He was only 19 years old. I was destroyed. Danny was my baby brother, and our whole family just collapsed into grief. The funeral was the worst day of my life up to that point. Ethan was there holding me when I cried, telling me, "We understand loss, you and me. Nobody else will get it." And in my broken state, that made sense. 2 weeks after the funeral, I agreed to move into his apartment because I couldn't stand being alone in mine with all Danny's photos on my phone. I thought Ethan was the only one who understood my pain. Looking back, that was the biggest mistake. I was vulnerable and grieving, and he used that to pull me deeper into his control. Ethan's apartment was in an old building on the edge of town with barely any neighbors. He immediately became more controlling, checking my phone, demanding passwords to all my accounts, getting angry if I went to the store without him. I felt trapped, but kept telling myself it was temporary, that he just needed help getting through his PTSD, and then things would get better. By late July, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. My grief for Danny was drowning under the weight of Ethan's constant surveillance, and I told him I was moving back to my parents' place. He went pale, grabbed my wrists hard enough to bruise, and said, "You can't leave. You're all I have." And when I tried pulling away, he started moving furniture toward the door. First the dresser, then the armchair, barricading the exit while I stood there frozen watching him work. I screamed, and he pulled out a tactical knife from the sheath on his belt, long black blade that he kept from the army, and put it against his own neck right on the carotid artery. "If you leave, I'll cut," he said, and his hand was shaking, the blade already pressing into his skin, leaving a red line. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just stood there staring at the knife against his throat. "If you scream and someone hears, I'll do it fast, then come for you," he added, and his eyes had this emptiness I'd never seen before, like he wasn't even in there anymore. I don't remember how long we stood there, minutes or an hour. Time stopped while I watched the blade dig at his neck. I kept my hands visible and talked soft, promising I'd stay, saying I loved him, saying we'd figure it out if he put the knife down. He wouldn't. Blood beaded where the edge pressed, a thin line down to his collar. Then I said, "Ethan, I feel sick. I'm going to pass out." And I let my knees go. He leaned over me. I heard the knife hit the floor. "Emily, hey, stay with me," he said, shaking my shoulder, and then he ran to the sink for water. I opened my eyes, grabbed my purse by the door, and hit the barricade hard, shoved the dresser enough to slide past, knocked the armchair aside, and sprinted into the hall. I pounded on the elderly couple's door across the hall and yelled that I needed police. They let me in. I collapsed on their couch and shook so hard my teeth hurt. Police came 8 minutes later. They arrested Ethan and sent him for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. An officer told me to pack while they were there. I stuffed a backpack and left my keys on his table. At the station, while I gave my statement, his mother got in my face. "You don't understand PTSD. You provoked him." I wanted to scream, but all I said was that I'd tried to leave an abusive relationship. A clinician called later and said the working diagnosis was borderline personality disorder with post-traumatic elements, and that he was on a hold. I slept at my parents' place and kept answering unknown numbers out of fear it was the hospital or a cop with bad news. In the morning, I photographed my bruised wrists and sent the pictures to the detective, because I knew I'd need everything documented. They released Ethan after 2 weeks, and the nightmare started again. He showed up at my work where I'd gotten a job as a vet assistant at a clinic on Oakwood Avenue, just standing in the parking lot staring through the reception windows. I got anonymous calls in the middle of the night, heavy breathing and silence before hanging up. My parents installed cameras at their house where I was living and caught his car crawling past after midnight more than once. I filed for a restraining order and got it in October 2020, but Ethan violated it 4 times. Twice at the clinic, once following me in the grocery store, once waiting outside church after Sunday service. Police arrested him each time, but the judge gave fines and warnings and told him to comply, which did nothing. I changed my routines and routes, parked by exits, told coworkers to walk me to my car, and kept screenshots and dates in a binder in case someone finally took it seriously. I stopped wearing my name tag outside work because he'd say my name like it belonged to him. I developed severe PTSD, startle response through the roof, sleeping with the lights on, freezing when I heard boots in a hallway. Nightmares were the same loop, him cutting his throat while I watched, and somehow it was my fault in the dream every time. Therapy helped slowly. EMDR, worksheets, grounding, and month by month the panic attacks shortened. By 2022, the incidents stopped. I heard he moved to another state from someone at the bar where we met, and for the first week after that, I didn't believe it. I kept waiting for headlights outside at 2 a.m. Now it's 2024. I'm 24 years old, still working at the vet clinic. dating a kind man named Liam, who never raises his voice and backs off when I say I need space. I still wake up some nights with my heart hammering. I still check the locks 3 times before bed and line my shoes by the door in case I need to run. I still feel my throat tighten when I see military vehicles on the road, and sometimes I pull over until the feeling passes. But I'm alive. I'm breathing. And that's a win Ethan didn't get to take from me, no matter how hard he tried. I was working as a waitress at Roadhouse Grill on the highway between 2 small towns when Cole first walked in late one August evening. We were slow that night. He took a corner booth, ordered a burger and coffee, and left a tip that felt ridiculous for a quiet Tuesday. He said I had a great smile, not in a sleazy way, more like a practiced charm. He looked 30-ish, sun-bleached hair, tanned leather jacket with patches I didn't recognize. His Harley was the cleanest thing in our dusty lot. Over the next 2 weeks, he came in 3 or 4 times, always requested my section, and kept the conversation on easy stuff. Roads, weather on the coast, good diners you only find by accident. He brought small gifts the way some people bring receipts. A Route 66 keychain, a magnet from a mountain town he said I'd like, a thin leather bracelet he claimed he'd made. Waitressing is repetitive, and people rarely see you as a person. It was nice to feel seen. Steve, my manager, teased me that I had a fan club of 1. One night, while I was rolling silverware, Cole asked if I'd ever been on a bike. I said no. He asked if I wanted to fix that after my shift. I thought about it longer than I'm proud of, then said yes. We rode 40 minutes on empty county roads. I didn't romanticize it, just wind, noise, and the feeling of my stomach dropping on the long dips. It did feel freeing, though. He kept it calm, didn't show off. Afterward, he took me to a diner in the next town where nobody knew either of us. It was basic food, and he listened more than he talked. In the parking lot, he kissed me, a quick, soft thing that didn't feel like a test. I drove home thinking this might be good for me. The warning signs started during week 3. Cole began waiting at the bar until my shift ended, every night, even when I stayed late to help close. He'd sit in the corner with coffee or Coke, eyes on me like he was timing my steps. One evening, Mark, a trucker who stops weekly and tells the same stories, threw an arm around my shoulders while joking about a blown tire outside Reno. It was harmless. Cole walked up, planted himself too close to Mark, and said, "Take your hands off my girlfriend." I said, "Cole, come on." But Mark took his arm back, muttered sorry, and left his coffee half full. After, I told Cole, calm and clear, that Mark is a regular, and I can't be rude to people who tip me and treat me fine. Cole said, "Men only understand one language. I'm protecting what matters to me." He said it like he was doing me a favor. A few days later, we were getting directions to a taco place he liked, and he asked for my phone to pull up the address. I watched him open messages and scroll, fast. I took it back. "Why did you do that?" He didn't even pretend. "Just checking you're not texting other guys. If you're clean, you got nothing to worry about." It felt like cold water inside me. The next afternoon in the parking lot, I told him I needed a break. "It's too fast," I said. He gripped his handlebars so tight his knuckles went pale, but his voice stayed level. "If you need time, take time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." He wasn't bluffing. He kept coming to the bar but stopped talking, just sat by the window and stared, ordering water he never touched. Steve offered to toss him. Steve's a decent guy. But technically, Cole wasn't breaking rules. No loudness, no harassment, no loitering beyond a normal drink. We both knew it wasn't normal. Then I started seeing his truck around town. An old black Dodge Ram. Paint dull, but recognizable. In the grocery store lot while I grabbed milk. Parked 2 pumps over at the gas station by my apartment. Across the street from my building on a Saturday morning like he'd camped out early. Every time, he stayed behind the wheel, looking toward me, never approaching. It was worse than yelling. I couldn't predict him. My brother Ethan, 23, drove up from college that weekend. He saw my face when I spotted the Dodge and said, "That him?" I showed him a photo. He said, "If he shows again, I'll talk to him." Man to man. Not to start something, just to shut this down. He meant it. He's not reckless. He's the kind of guy who reads all the instructions before assembling a chair. It made me feel less alone. Sunday night we went to a late movie. Something dumb to keep my brain from spiraling. On the way back, around 10, empty 2-lane leading toward my complex, Ethan drove his Camry while I kept checking the passenger mirror out of habit. I felt okay for maybe 5 minutes. Then a single headlight appeared behind us, far back, growing. Ethan glanced up. "You good?" I listened and knew before the light got close. The engine had that low, distinct rumble I'd learned without trying. Cole's Harley was closing fast. The motorcycle caught up, riding a few feet off our rear bumper. Ethan said, "Seatbelt." Tight. He eased to the right to give space, then pushed up to 65. Cole stuck there, headlight eating our mirror. He slid left into the oncoming lane and pulled alongside. I saw his face under the dim stretch lights, tight jaw, eyes on Ethan, not me. He yelled over the noise and I caught pieces. "Your sister, let go, mine." He thought Ethan was someone else. I shouted, "He's my brother." But it vanished in the wind. Ethan said, "Hold on," and took it to 80. Cole matched us, still riding in the oncoming lane while a curve came up fast. "He's not going to," I started, and then he did. He jerked the bars right and banged the Harley into the Camry's left side. We lurched. The car broke loose. The shoulder came up, and then the ditch. Mud, grass, a slam that rattled my teeth. My head hit the window. We churned another stretch and finally stopped at an angle. The engine coughed and died. The cabin smelled like burnt rubber and dust. I heard the motorcycle fade and realized he was leaving. No pause, no check. He was gone. Ethan took a breath like he'd been underwater. "You okay?" he asked, voice flat. My forehead was wet. When I touched it, my fingers came back red. He rotated his shoulder and winced. The wheels spun and the car didn't move. He killed the ignition and called 911. Then he called his friend who lived 10 minutes away, telling him where to find us because the sign we passed last was the only helpful marker. Police got there about 15 minutes later, lights flashing onto weeds and our muddy bumper. The ambulance showed up maybe 10 after that. A paramedic cleaned my cut and asked about dizziness. Ethan's shoulder stiffened while we waited, and they recommended an X-ray. At the hospital, they taped a small pad to my forehead and took images of his shoulder. No fracture, just bruising. The tow truck yanked the Camry out of the ditch. The left side was scraped all the way down. The driver's door had a dent that made the seal whistle at speed later. But it drove. We gave statements at the station. I told them about the weeks of him sitting in the bar, the truck by my place, the gifts, the ride, the phone. I had pictures of Cole, his Harley, and the black Dodge from across the street. I'd taken them because I felt stupid not having proof. The officers said what he did counted as reckless driving with harm, maybe assault with a vehicle depending on what they could make stick. They ran the plate and 2 days later said they'd found him. His bike was in his name. Address sat in the system. When they brought him in, he denied ramming us. He said he wanted to talk and we panicked. No witnesses, no cameras on that stretch. But the scuff on his crash bar and the crease on our door matched up, and his conversation at 80 at night excuse sounded thin. He was charged and months later, sentenced. 18 months probation, community service, fines, license suspended a year. A restraining order kept him 500 feet from me. Paper isn't a wall, but it was something. Insurance didn't cover all of Ethan's repairs because Cole carried the bare minimum. Ethan paid out of savings. I gave what I could. I quit the roadhouse a month after the crash. I couldn't clock in knowing he knew the layout, the exits, the schedule. I took a job at a family place downtown. Cameras at every corner. A manager who walked people to their cars. 4 years later, a mutual acquaintance from the bike crowd told me Cole died on the highway. Wet pavement, bad angle, guardrail. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell many people. I sat in my kitchen and tried to feel one clean thing and couldn't. Years passed. I got married. We moved states. I had a daughter who likes to wave at trucks. Most days are normal now. But when a Harley goes by our house, loud and low, my hands still clamp the steering wheel if I'm parked in the driveway. My chest tightens before my head catches up. I say out loud, "It isn't him." And it isn't. He's gone. But the sound still hits the same switch.